Okay, I'm back. Hi. I'm here with Dr. Jeff Caterino from the College of Medicine. Jeff is an emergency medicine physician and gerontologist and is an associate dean for research in the College of Medicine. And we've had the good fortune to collaborate together on grants in the past. So we're going to talk about interpreting reviewer comments, responding to reviewer comments, and Jeff has a great exemplars to provide for you around responding to reviewer comments, and then we'll open to questions and discussion. So, we mentioned wine. My first step is to breathe, walk away, and pour some wine. Some of my colleagues just set it aside and after the first read and don't return to it for a day or two. I can't do that. Certainly eliciting consultation from your team and outside your team. For interpretation of what these comments mean. You want to avoid the group think. We have some exemplars of teams who want to continue to march in their same line and just reiterate their rationale for the choice, rather than, and an external reader will say, they're telling you that you need to do an RCT. That's what this means. So if you continue with this design, it's not going to get funded. The very important statement of weaknesses versus strengths in a summary, and we'll provide a couple examples of those. The weaknesses outweigh the strengths is not great, or there are many strengths but a few weaknesses, that kind of thing. Some key words and phrases to look for are concern about sustainability, feasibility, scalability, concern about roles, co-investigator roles, and to the question posed earlier, do reviewers look at the team? They absolutely do. They absolutely look at your team's bio sketches. They'll pick out weaknesses in your team. And particularly if you're going for R01 funding, that team should have some track record, or at least the key players on that team should have some track record. And so if you're constituting a new team, make sure that you have a publication together. Ambitious means you've overreached. And concern about the timeline, again, means that it's a question of feasibility and ambition, how much you're trying to do in the time allotted. So certainly discussing the critique and what you think are the key points and your ideas about your response with your program officer is important. I like to have another person on the call so that sometimes program officer speak requires a little bit of interpretation as well. So asking about how they would gauge the general enthusiasm and fit for the application is important. Now, to the points made earlier, you would have already, that program officer hopefully would have already seen your specific aims page as part of your pre-application discussion with them. But now they're looking at the critique along with you to talk about general enthusiasm and fit, and then asking about what were the particular or most critical areas of focus in the review from their perspective. And certainly being prepared with bullet points of what you think the plan changes or response should be. And I've had program officers like really redirect or suggest an alternative interpretation. And that's really important. So in drafting the response to reviewers, you certainly have to involve the team. It's a team sport, but you as the PI are the final voice. And so with that example of, you know, the team having the group think around what the design should be, the PI in that case really had to take a stand and say, no, we're shifting to an RCT. Keep the tone of the response factual. It's really hard sometimes to resist temptations to point out what the reviewers missed. I said that on page 5. Or what they got wrong. And, you know, we certainly see that, but antagonizing the reviewers in a response just really never helps. Also, and this, as a reviewer, sometimes people kind of spend a lot of time complimenting the reviewer, you know, going to the other side. Oh, thank you for that, for those wise comments. And that's, you know, the introduction is fine, but don't go overboard on complimenting the reviewers. We can kind of see through that, and we know you're wasting valuable real estate on the page. Jeff and I kind of have different approaches to this, deciding on how to respond to specific reviewers. So you don't want the tone necessarily to be calling out, well, in response to reviewer 1's comment about blah, 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 might have a tone of calling out versus using reviewer 1, reviewer 2, reviewer 3 as an organizing technique. And I think that's what Jeff does. Or in parentheses, that was in response to reviewer 1, you know, reviewer 1, as you're doing your point-by-point response. And certainly get external feedback on that draft response page. Just like the specific aims page can take a month, that response to reviewers is absolutely key on a resubmission and can take a month. So a couple approaches that seem to be helpful: creating a point-by-point table. Now this can end up being several pages long, so then because you only have a one-page response, you might want to consolidate that into like thematic areas or some other organizational device by reviewer or by section. And so there's an example. 9 primary concerns. There were probably more than 9 comments, but we were able to thematically characterize them into 9 primary concerns. I think so, yeah. The rest is for you.
So these were my points. Is this is working okay? The microphone? Okay, good. And I think a lot of the things are the same. The first thing is you're going to get at the beginning of your review a summary statement, and that summarizes the discussion. So what that is you've had 3 reviewers who've made comments independently, and then there's this discussion led by those 3 reviewers. That summary statement tells you what the critical points of the discussion were. So I think those in particular are the areas you need to look at. Something might have only been mentioned by 1 reviewer, but if it made it to the summary, that summary paragraph, it's probably really important and you need to focus on it. Same thing as Mary Beth said, I agree, you respond to each and every query. It's almost like if you had a manuscript reviewed, when you go send it back to the editors, you've responded point by point, right, to the to the reviewer comments. You do the same thing here. And I do the same thing. I almost create a table. I take every single point, and then I put what my response is, and then I figure out how to organize it on my single page. Don't argue with them. They're going to be back and look at it again. So I don't tell them they're wrong. I might gently point out why they missed it. And if you disagree, there will be times when they are absolutely wrong. They don't understand the science, etc. If they didn't understand it or you disagree with them, that's okay. But what you need to do is respond to it. Don't ignore it. So if they said, you've forgotten to do X, you need to do X, you can say, well, X is not really relevant, we're going to do Y. But do it in a way that at least responds and recognizes their concern, and they'll be open to what you need, why they were wrong. But you have to be careful, and you can't just ignore when they ask you to do X.
It's also good there to provide rationale or references for the why.
Right, absolutely. And if they miss something or don't understand, don't blame them. They had to review 5 of them. They're tired of doing it. I did my study section this week. I finished at 8 o'clock last night. It was due at midnight. I'm sure I missed something in the last application. Be clearer. I always look at it as I wasn't clear enough, not that they missed something. Same thing, that one-pager, just like the rest of your grant. Make it clear, make it readable, make it easy for the reviewers who had major concerns to see how you address those major concerns. So Mary Beth talked about one way that, hey, there were 9 major concerns in this review. Here's the 9 points, and here's how I addressed them. I'm going to show you an example of where we did it a little differently. It's okay, and somebody mentioned it, change to an RCT. If they really hate something, get that signal, talk to the PO. With my R01, they hated AIM 3, absolutely hated AIM 3. I just got rid of AIM 3. I said, okay, that's fine, and I expanded AIM 2, and I went, all the comments on methods were in AIM 3. There were no problems with AIMs 1 and 2, so at that point, I just threw it out and did something different, and that's okay. There's also a tendency, remember the old Meatloaf song, 2 out of 3 ain't bad? Well, it's not that great, because what happens is study sections are like herds of gazelles. So it only takes there was only 3 people who read your grant. The other 3 people are sitting there flipping through it while it's being discussed for 15 minutes, the rest of the study section. If one person has a big problem, and we're going to see an example of that in our exemplar, if one person has a big problem, they get the rest of the herd scared and everybody stampedes away from the grant. So what we're going to see is 2 of the reviewers in the example on a K-23 thought the mentorship was great. I think they were a 1 and a 2. The 3rd reviewer gave the mentorship a 6. And I'm quite certain that, and they're right, there's issues with the mentorship plan, and I'm quite certain that they stampeded everybody else away. So it's very easy to say, oh, look, 2 of the reviewers liked it. We got 1s and 2s. But you got to look, if somebody gave you a 5 or a 6 in something or a 7, they had a huge problem with that section, and they probably advocated, they really hated it, to be perfectly honest. When I give a 6 or a 7, there's something I really don't like. And I probably convinced a lot of other people on that study section that there's a big problem here. So even though 2 people thought it was great, if somebody gave you a 6 or 7, you really got to pay a lot of attention to it. Any other thoughts on that? Or no? So this is the first half of a page. I just wanted to give you an example, and it might be hard to read. I don't expect you to read this. We probably spent, this was a response to a K-23 for a clinical project. I want to thank Lauren Sutherland. I was the mentor on this, not the primary. We probably spent too long thanking them. That probably should have been a line instead of 2 lines, so Mary Beth taught me something already. I tend to do these based on sections. So for a K-23, there's a candidate review, there's a career development plan review, there's a research plan. And then we start addressing issues. And then what I do is I put who made the comment. And again, Mary Beth and I differ a little bit. To me, what that does is reviewer 2, reviewer 3. If I'm reviewer 2 and I'm seeing this again, I can say, hey, I had a big problem in the career development plan. Did they address my problem? And it makes it easier for the reviewers to kind of find that their question was addressed. If they're this, that's fine. The other way to do it is to do the big thematic analysis. There were 2 problems with the candidate. There's 1 problem in the career development plan, et cetera. So it just has to be clear. And what you want is when this comes back to the committee, you want someone to take that 1-pager and I just did this week. You take the 1-pager, you take the last review, and make sure that everything was answered. And so some organization is really important. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this K23 that we got. This scored a 32nd percentile, and it's getting re-reviewed this week, so hopefully we fixed it. So this, there were many strengths that they listed. So this was good, right? The summary was, well, there were many strengths, several weaknesses were noted. That's not too bad. That means they like it, right? In general, they like it. They don't hate us. They don't hate our dogs. They want to read something more. So I broke it down. Basically, in that summary, there were 6 main points. Concern about the administrative duties for the applicant because she's supposed to be 75% effort. That's easy, right? We'll fix that easily. The analysis plan has numerous flaws, and they were correct, so we got to fix that. Timeline is deficient for implementation. Mary Beth mentioned that, but again, fixable. Weakness, any weakness in a career development plan and coursework on clinical, that's easy to fix. You just do the courses that they tell you to do, right? They didn't like some of the career development plan. No information presented on the mentoring history of the mentors. This is a big one because I can't suddenly have mentored more people, so that's a problem. And then they didn't like, again, more career development, like the MPH degree we didn't justify. And they had, even with those limitations, the application is recommended with moderately high enthusiasm. So we feel pretty good about this. Really, out of the main things that were discussed, there's only one big thing sticking out there, mentoring history of the mentors, right? So basically, she needs a better mentor. All right. So if we go section by section, and what I did was on the left, I kind of put the key points that they brought up, and this is a mashup of all the reviewers. And on the right, I kind of put our paraphrased response. So we don't have to go through all these, but the scores on the candidate were a 2-1-2, which is pretty good. So they like her. Excellent. They were worried, may need to reduce other research efforts to focus on the K23, and they were worried about concern that time was overcommitted. So we specifically said we clarified their clinical and teaching effort, how it will hand off how she's going to hand off responsibilities. I also, in my response, I tell them where stuff is. I don't make them hunt for it. The BioSketch, the candidate page, and the chair letter will show you how we fix this. And I put important stuff in multiple places, right? Background to successfully complete the trial. She basically had limited experience in trial conduct and management. And so the candidate section, we put additional details on the pertinence of ongoing trials experience. And I think there's a little more detail. Obviously, I would have made the slide too long. But again, it's in the candidate section. Go look there. We've got this. Minimal track record of independent funding. This is a problem. She didn't get it. She's only had a couple of small grants, right? So we had to come up with an answer. So can't create a track record of funding. But although I have no new independent funding to report, my team has exceeded startup times, enrollment goals, and data entry goals for the trials that I do manage. So I haven't independently run a study, but I'm site PI on a couple things, and what we've done, it's been fine. So kind of an indirect response, but all very answerable stuff. And by the way, stop me if you have any. So the career development plan they liked less, 3, 2, 4, but no 5s or 6s, so we're still okay. You can make 4s 2s, and you can make 3s 1s by just doing what they say. Topics for individual mentoring are not sufficiently detailed. So what we did, we provided additional information on format, subject matter, faculty duration, and frequency. And we put a study timeline and training tables. Again, I told them where they are, in the career development plan and the training in RCR. The career development plan does not specifically detail plans for training and design and conduct of clinical trials. So again, the MPH courses now target those specific skills. There's insufficient detail on development of grant writing skills. So we're doing specific training in grant writing in the CCTS's K to R program and MPH course 6413. So specifics and again where it is. So just point by point. I think that'll get her to 1s and 2s on her career development plan, and we're not too worried about that. It's going to get more interesting in a second. The research plan, 4s, 3s, 4s. Okay, so they don't hate us. This is good. Right? This is all fixable stuff. This first one is the example of someone who misunderstood. So they said, you've got a year collecting baseline data. You can do that from chart reviews. You don't need a year. They're actually incorrect. because we have to get some outcomes that are not in the charts. We have to ask the patients about some of their outcomes data and some other stuff. So we put, we talked a little bit, and then we said this clarifies that AIM-2 requires a baseline period to enroll a pre-intervention cohort to obtain outcomes unavailable in chart reviews. So the reviewer was just wrong, and that's okay. And we just kind of gently say, no, we need it, and this is why. And I think that's just a way for the reviewer to be fine. AIM-1 methods are unclear. We didn't qualify who the subjects are. We fixed that. This is one where the reviewer completely missed it. A key feature of concern is delirium, yet there's no plans for enrolling or assessing those with delirium. Well, we do. We have legally authorized representatives that can do it. So what we did was we did two things. The first was we said we put appropriate protections to recruit those patients with cognitive impairment. And again, I directed them at section E3 and section F4. So if they have a question about it, they can go there and look for it while they're doing this. And then they can say, oh, yep, it's there, good, move on. Because what I want to do as a reviewer, I just want to check off things. All right, they did this, they did this, they did this. And if you can help them check off things, much easier and very happy reviewer.
So Jeff, this isn't something that you added. It was already there.
It was there.
They missed it, and instead of saying you missed it, you're just saying where it is.
Right.
So you could have been adding it or you could have not, but, right?
Right, absolutely. Just said it's there. And directing them to where to go is really easy. I think, John, they mentioned it last time. You don't want angry reviewers. Jason was sitting next to me in the ER about a week ago, and I was reading a grant with actually a smile on my face. I was happy. I was describing how the grants I had read the night before actually made me angry because they were so disorganized and so hard to read. So it makes a huge difference. Now, I'm not going to go into the data analysis. Our data analysis plan was horrible on the first submission. It just was unclear. It didn't have power for every outcome, et cetera. And basically, the quantitative analysis, it was all bad. It was just all bad, right? So again, statistical analysis is greatly expanded to address the points of Reviewer 2 and Reviewer 3. Go to sections F9 and F12. This is kind of an example. And even here, I said for AIM-1, we said what we're going to do because they had a big problem with AIM-1. And I put in where it is. And I think that helps reviewers. You have to have power for every outcome. Even you have a primary outcome with power, that's fine. That's what your study's powered on. You've got to tell them the power for your other outcomes. They're going to look for power for every single outcome. Number 3 is the example of the reviewer thinks you should do something else. And wow, wouldn't it be neat if? So what they wanted us to do was not just enroll some patients. They wanted to enroll this whole other group because it would be cool to know. Right? You've seen this before.
Yes.
And it's painful because that's not what your project's about, and it's an incredible amount of work, and it's ancillary. So they said those screened in step 1 may end up in one of 3 groups. Perhaps valuable information could also be gleaned by collecting more data on the full population, including those admitted, not just those discharged. Yeah, it could be, but we're worried about the people going home in our study. So this is the way we try to answer it. Again, telling them they're wrong, but doing it nicely, right? While not a listed outcome, we will be able to address the questions of Reviewer 3 about patients with non-observation dispositions as we get them in our electronic medical record data dump. This analysis is not included in the research plan as it's ancillary to our specific aims, but can easily be accomplished with the data collected. I don't know if they're going to like that or not, but we're recognizing, yeah, it's a good point. It's kind of a distraction a little bit, so but we've got the data there if we want to do it. I don't know. We'll see if they like it.
Those are some of the hardest types of comments to address, I think.
I think the danger is you go and chase your tail down a hole, down a rabbit hole that doesn't get you anywhere, and it makes the grant even more confusing. Because now I'd have a whole other group that I'd be analyzing. It would have been a very, very bad idea to put those people in our grant. It would have made everything confusing. Okay. Here's 2 other good examples. We were doing the screening of the patients in the emergency department. They were very concerned about nursing time. And here's a key word that I can see came up in the discussion. The barrier to overcoming the time pressures of ED nurses may be insurmountable. I underlined that. If they say something might be insurmountable, you better figure out a way to answer that, right? So what did we do? We basically sent a research assistant down and had them time the nurses doing it for 10 patients. That's it, right? So we answered that would be the one sort of, when they say insurmountable, that's like the fatal flaw, right? If you can't fix that, if you can't address this, they're going to say you can't do the project. So we conducted a pilot showing the total time was 2.5 minutes, and we put it in section E7, which is our preliminary data. So we added a tiny little slug of preliminary data. Didn't take that long. Hopefully, but when you see words like insurmountable, you better figure out a way to surmount it, I guess. Because that they'll say, oh, they didn't fix it, they're done. The total burden of assessments on the subjects is not addressed. Again, they're worried about on the patients, we're spending too much time. And basically we said, well, this is already in our preliminary data. And we've done this before, and we have a general idea of how much time it is. And it's in section E.3, so you can go take a look at that. So again, very, very kind of key points. Okay, so my next paragraph on this was the mentorship page. Now this is the two out of 3, right? 2 people loved me as the primary mentor. 1 person didn't like me so much. And it's not that the middle person is with the score of 6 is wrong. They're actually probably really correct. So don't get blinded by that 1 and 2, because the 6, I'm sure the 6 drove the discussion. And remember that mentorship was one of the key points in the first paragraph, in the summary paragraph. So that 6 drove the discussion. In general, there was not enough details on in general, they did not provide details on their mentoring history and outcome. Dr. Caterino's mentoring track record is not reported and does not show a strong history of mentoring. So both R2 and R3, even the person who gave it a 2 said that. Other than a generic reference in Dr. Mayon's letter of support, there's no detailed evidence of K-level mentoring among any of the named mentors. Now, Lorraine Mayon in the College of Nursing has mentored about 20-some K awardees, I think. So that's our fault, right? We didn't really explain how great of a mentor she is. So what do? We did a couple things. We talked to the program officer about this. We actually added mentoring tables. This is where we overcompensated, because I think this was another potential fatal flaw that's driving our score down. We added mentoring tables in the bio sketches and in the mentorship plan. This was recommended by the program officer and by every person. So Dr. Mayan put in her first part of her bio sketch, I've mentored 27 people, and in the end of the bio sketch, here they are. We overcompensated. We thought this was the biggest concern the reviewers had, and so we just did as much as we could. We put it everywhere. In the letter, we said, although I have not previously mentored a K awardee, he's a wonderful human being. And we basically we came up, we were creative as to how are we going to prove that I can mentor her and they don't have to worry. We want them not to worry. So we said, well, look, Lorraine Mayan is really involved in this. She's there. But secondly, for me, what we did was we buffed up the mentorship team, so Lorraine and I together working on this. We put some more information about the people I have mentored. We linked in the institutional resources of mentoring through the CCTS, and I even said that I was going to get further training in mentoring because the CCTS has mentoring training. So I said in years 1 and 2, I'm going to do that. So we gave them 4 reasons why I'm a wonderful mentor. And hopefully it's enough, and with Dr. Mayan's experience, they'll say, okay, well, the team is in place. So we spent a lot of time figuring that out. The final thing was there's a little prior collaboration with mentors. We had some new, so this goes back to publishing with your mentors in a K award, and we basically just counted them. You know, Dr. Sutherland has 6 publications with me, 1 with Dr. Carpenter, 2 with Dr. Stevens, and 1 with Dr. Garay, with further manuscripts under review. So we just gave them numbers. Like there is actually publications there, and nice and concise, boom. Okay. I think I'm almost done. And that was actually it. So these are kind of what I had said before, but I think we've got 5 or 10 minutes for questions, hopefully.
Questions? Sounds like they did an awesome job on the response to review.
I'll let you know in a week.
Hey, thank you so much for this session. It was very helpful and very informative. I have a question. When you mentioned that if the reviewers hated an aim or a section and you decide to take it out, how do you respond to this in the intro? Like, you know, how do you address this? Like, do you say you take it out, or like you
I told them I took it out. We said, you know, there were multiple flaws pointed out in aim 3. We've removed aim 3 from the grant. In its place, we've expanded what we're going to do in aim 2. And then I just ignore all the aim 3 stuff because it's gone.
But this doesn't make a problem because, like, if they were expecting to see response, not just like taking it out, like.
I personally think they're okay. If it was so bad, I mean, the two options are you just fix it or you say, you know, so in this case, the aim was basically it needed an RCT as a sort of sub, right? It was just, and I said some things like, look, to do it would be beyond the scope of the grant. You know, we need more preliminary data that we don't have right now, so we think the time's not right. You can come, you know, why did they say it doesn't work? Did they say, you know, you need more training and technique?
Exactly, it
Yeah.
was feasibility. They
Yeah.
thought
So
like my aim 3 was like less feasible, especially this was a K. I will be in the R00 phase. So they thought like if I decide to do this only by myself and I decide to leave the institution, this won't be feasible. So that's why like the idea
Yeah.
is just taking it out.
So, I mean, you know, it just depends. Is it for feasibility, is it that you have the data and just didn't show them that it is feasible? And so the question is what they said fixable or not fixable? And if it's not fixable, it's okay to just say, you're right, it's not fixable now. I think in the future, you know, maybe that's a future direction. That becomes a future direction in the grant. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think I moved it there. I said, you know, hey, this is a therapeutic. We were just testing biomarkers. I said, this is a therapeutic thing that really didn't fit. So we think if everything works out, that'll be a future grant. So I moved it almost and just mentioned it as a future direction.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
And just to put a point on that, I think Jeff is saying it's not just that it got a high score. I mean, just don't go by the score. If it's fixable, you don't have to jettison it. But if you really think it's not fixable and it'll take away from the other two primary aims, then the jettisoning.
Yeah, and I don't do this all the time. I'm not saying do this all the time, but I just wanted to let folks know it's okay to do in, you know, certain situations.
This is couples with your earlier presentation about just getting started as a new investigator. It sounds like you get a lot of good feedback from the NIH, whether or not your award or your application gets accepted. As you're getting started and trying to decide where to apply, do you get the same sort of feedback if you're applying to foundation grants? And do you recommend foundation grants versus maybe pursuing a K because the feedback's a little stronger from an NIH application?
Well, I definitely recommend an NIH-K.
Over a foundation?
Yes, and as I said before, cover your bets, and if there's a career development opportunity in a foundation that fits your area, send them both in. Mm-hmm. Worry about which you can do after they both get funded, you know. So definitely hedge your bets. The relationship building, it can be different with foundations. Some foundations, program officers will talk to you and help foster you. Other foundations are hands-off. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just something you have to get to know, and hopefully the foundations relations officer can help you with that, as can your development office. Does that help?
Yeah.
The other thing that I don't think we mentioned is sometimes in shopping a grant, if there are more than one institute that sort of signs on to that funding announcement, and you think, oh, well, maybe I could fit into minority health or nursing, but I don't know. You can shop your Ames page to both and get a sense of enthusiasm. And then in your cover letter and application, you can name whichever one you think it will fly best in. You can name that as the primary and other institutes as subs. I don't know that that's so that it's not necessarily what you would do with a K, but in our grants.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, cool, thanks.